October 14th, 1943, 26,000 feet above the German border, inbound to Schweinfurt. The air is thin and viciously cold, a crystalline blue desert stretching to an endless horizon. Inside the cramped cockpit of his Focke-Wulf 19, Oberleutnant Klaus Richter can feel the vibration of the BMW radial engine through his spine, a familiar and comforting hum. He is a hunter in his natural element. Below, the patchwork of autumn fields is a distant, irrelevant map. Up here, in the sub-zero sunlight, is where the real war is fought. His breath fogs the inside of his oxygen mask. Through the armored glass of his canopy, he scans the sky, his eyes trained by hundreds of combat hours to pick out the specks that mean life or death. His radio man's voice crackles in his ears, sharp and tinny. Bandits, 12 o'clock high. Looks like the whole 8th Air Force is coming to visit today. Klaus keys his own microphone, his voice calm. Let them come. More targets for the score sheet. A ripple of confident assent echoes from the other pilots in his Schwarm, the 4 fighters of his immediate command within Jagdgeschwader 26. They are the Abbeville boys, the yellow-nosed terrors of the Channel Front, and they fear nothing that flies. And then they see them. Not just the lumbering B-17 flying fortresses, the fat silver whales plodding stoically toward their target, but their new escorts. Klaus squints. These are not the elegant, twin-boomed P-38 Lightnings or the familiar, shark-like P-51s. These are different. They are enormous, brutish. A single, massive radial engine housed in a cowling the size of a small car. A barrel-chested fuselage that tapers back to a conventional tail. The Republic P-47 Thunderbolt. Laughter crackles over the radio. "Look at them," says Franz, his young wingman. "They look like flying milk jugs." The name sticks. Jug. It fits. The aircraft lacks any of the predatory grace of his Focke-Wulf or the knife-like profile of a Messerschmitt Bf-109. It looks like what it is, an American machine. Big, heavy, and probably about as agile as a farm tractor. Klaus feels a surge of professional contempt. How could their engineers design something so agricultural? He has heard the intelligence reports. Over 7 tons fully loaded. 7 tons. His own FW-190, a machine he considers the pinnacle of piston engine fighter design, is barely 4. "All right, boys, let's go show these farmers how we fly," Klaus transmits, a smirk playing on his lips. His plan is simple, a classic head-on pass against the bombers, the high closing speed attack that gives the fortress gunners mere seconds to react. The Thunderbolts are positioned high, weaving a lazy protective pattern. Too lazy. He pushes the throttle forward, and the FW-190 leaps ahead. He feels the G-force press him into his seat as he rolls into a steep, diving turn, the sun at his back. He picks out his bomber, the lead element of the lowest squadron. The Thunderbolts react, but sluggishly. One of them, painted with a garish checkerboard nose, peels off and turns to intercept him. Klaus watches it, almost clinically. The P-47's turn is wide, ponderous. It bleeds energy with every degree of the arc. He could fly circles around this thing. He ignores it for the moment, focusing on the bomber. The B-17 grows in his gun sight until he can see the ball turret swiveling desperately to track him. He waits. Waits. Now. A short, disciplined burst from his 4 20mm cannons and 2 machine guns. He sees the shells strike home, chewing a line of glittering holes along the bomber's wing route. Number 2 engine erupts in a greasy black plume of smoke. The job done, he brakes hard right, jinking to avoid the return fire. The P-47 is still there, trying to get on his tail. Klaus chuckles. He pulls his stick back into a tight climbing turn, a chandelle, a maneuver that would strain a lesser aircraft. The Focke-Wulf responds instantly, clawing its way back toward the sun. The Thunderbolt pilot tries to follow, but it's hopeless. The huge American fighter mushes, its nose rising sluggishly, on the verge of a high-speed stall. It's like watching a whale try to chase a dolphin. Klaus easily gains position behind and above the struggling American. The pilot must know he's beaten. He does the only thing he can. He noses over and dives. Not a controlled, tactical dive, but a panicked plunge for the safety of the cloud deck miles below. A coward's escape. Klaus watches him go, tempted to follow and finish him, but the primary mission is the bombers. He lets him run. Over the radio, the flight is jubilant. "Did you see that, Klaus? He ran like a scared rabbit." "They can't turn, they can't climb," Klaus reports. "They are heavy, no threat to us. We can ignore them and focus on the Wehrmachts." Returning to his base in France, the mood is buoyant. The pilots gather in the mess hall, drinking coffee and recounting their victories. They mock the fat American jug, drawing caricatures on napkins. It is a joke, a symbol of American clumsiness. They are the seasoned veterans, the artists of aerial combat. The Americans are simply throwing weight at the problem. Klaus shares the laughter, feeling the familiar warmth of victory. But his Staffelkapitän, a grizzled veteran with cold eyes who has been fighting since Poland, takes a slow drag from his cigarette. He looks at Klaus. "Be careful of things you do not understand," he says quietly, his voice a low rumble. "An elephant is clumsy until it is charging." Klaus nods respectfully, but inside he dismisses the warning. He saw the beast with his own eyes. It was slow, it was awkward, and it ran from a fight. November 26, 1943. Above the clouded skies of northern Germany. The weather is foul. A thick, soupy blanket of gray stretches from horizon to horizon, a miserable ceiling at 18,000 feet. The war, however, does not wait for clear skies. A massive formation of B-17s and B-24s is pushing toward Bremen, and Jagdgeschwader 26 has been scrambled to intercept. Klaus Richter, now leading his own schwarm, punches through the cloud layer, emerging into the blinding, sterile sunlight of the upper atmosphere. The cold is even more intense today, frost spiders across the edges of his canopy. Below him, the clouds look like a solid, rolling landscape of white mountains. It is a disorienting, alien world. The American bombers are there, as expected, a vast river of aluminum flowing through the stratosphere. And so are the jugs, more of them this time. They fly a tighter escort, their big frames looking no less clumsy than before, but there is an aggression in their posture that wasn't there a month ago. Klaus's contempt is now tempered with a cold professionalism. They are a nuisance that must be dealt with before the real work of downing bombers can begin. "Bandits at 10 o'clock, slightly high," his wingman, Kurt, calls out. "Let's take the bounce, Klaus." "Acknowledged," Klaus replies. "We go in pairs. High-speed pass only. Do not get into a turning fight. Hit them and extend." The new tactics have been drilled into them. Do not try to dogfight the P-47. Its pilots are learning. They refuse to be drawn into horizontal battles where their poor turning radius is a fatal disadvantage. Instead, they use their weight, diving and climbing, fighting in the vertical plane. Klaus has studied the reports. He understands the theory, but theory is a pale shadow of reality. He banks his FW-190, the yellow nose of his aircraft pointing toward a pair of Thunderbolts weaving on the far side of the bomber formation. He and Kurt accelerate in a shallow dive, building up immense speed. The closing velocity is tremendous. The two P-47s grow from specks to massive shapes in seconds. He focuses on the trailing aircraft, letting his cannons and machine guns speak in a single hammering staccato. Tracer rounds, ghostly bright even in the intense sunlight, lance out and strike the Thunderbolt's thick fuselage. He sees pieces of metal tear away from the cockpit area and the right wing root. Black smoke begins to pour from the engine. A good hit, a mortal hit on any other aircraft. The pilot of a Spitfire would be bailing out. A Messerschmitt's engine would be on fire. But the Thunderbolt does not die. It doesn't even falter. The smoke streams, but the aircraft holds its course, its massive propeller still churning the thin air. Klaus is stunned. He hit it with 20mm cannon shells, armor-piercing, high-explosive rounds, and it just absorbed them, like a heavyweight boxer taking a punch to the gut and grunting. Before he can readjust his aim for a killing blow, he is forced to break off as the lead P-47 banks sharply toward him. He pulls up, converting his speed back into altitude, and twists in the seat to look back. What he sees chills him. Kurt, his wingman, has made a mistake. Instead of extending away after his own pass, he has tried to turn back to get on the tail of the damaged jug. It is a rookie error born of overconfidence. The lead P-47, seeing its chance, has rolled over and is now plummeting after Kurt, not in a panicked escape, but in a controlled, predatory dive. "Kurt, dive! Get out of there!" Klaus screams into his microphone. But it's too late. Klaus watches, helpless from above. Kurt's FW-190 is fast in a dive, one of the best, but the P-47 is faster. The 7-ton American fighter, dragged down by gravity, accelerates at a terrifying rate. It is not an aircraft anymore. It is a bomb with wings. It closes the distance to Kurt's tail with sickening speed. The air itself seems to shriek under the strain of its passage. Klaus sees the pinprick flashes from the P-47's wings. He knows what they are. 8 heavy machine guns. He had dismissed them before. Machine guns were for strafing trucks, not for killing thoroughbred fighters like the FW-190. Cannons were the weapons of a true aerial hunter. He watches Kurt's aircraft jink violently, but the stream of tracers from the Thunderbolt is relentless, a solid line of light connecting the hunter to the hunted. Kurt's canopy shatters. The Focke-Wulf's tail assembly is shredded, fabric and metal peeling away into the slipstream. The aircraft snaps into an uncontrolled roll, trailing smoke and glycol. It spins down toward the white oblivion of the cloud deck below, a broken toy. There is no parachute. Klaus feels a cold dread snake into his stomach. He has just witnessed something that defied all his training and experience. He saw a fighter absorb a lethal cannon strike and keep fighting. He saw that same fighter outdive a Focke-Wulf, the Luftwaffe's premier diving aircraft. And he saw it kill his wingman with nothing but machine guns. He levels off, his engine screaming, his breath coming in ragged gasps. The radio is silent. The confident banter is gone. The sky, once a dueling ground, now feels like an abattoir. The jug was not a clumsy milk bottle. It was an anvil, an unbreakable, unforgiving anvil against which the Luftwaffe's finest were now being hammered. January 11th, 1944. High over the Oschersleben aircraft factories. The sky is a tapestry of chaos. Hundreds of contrails crisscross the deep, frigid blue, weaving a complex web of life and death. This is the new face of the air war, massive, brutal, and impersonal. The American 8th Air Force is striking deep into the heart of the Reich in force, and the Luftwaffe is rising to meet them in a desperate, full-scale battle of attrition. For Klaus Richter, the sport is gone. The thrill of the individual hunt has been replaced by the grim determination of a man trying to hold back a tidal wave. He is no longer a knight. He is a fireman, rushing from one blaze to another, knowing he can never extinguish the source of the inferno. His Schwarm is part of a combined attack force of over 200 German fighters. Their target is a combat box of B-17s, but to get to them, they must first go through the escorts, the P-47 Thunderbolts. They are everywhere, swarms of them, flying with a new, swaggering confidence. They no longer lumber, they prowl. Klaus grips his control stick, his knuckles white. The memory of Kurt's death is a cold stone in his gut. The squadron's tactics have evolved out of bitter necessity. Never, ever meet a Thunderbolt head-on, the new briefing directive stated in stark, underlined text. Their firepower is overwhelming. Use your superior rate of roll and climb at altitude. Make one pass and get out. Do not engage in a prolonged fight. He spots a flight of 4 P-47s slightly below, cruising with an almost arrogant steadiness. They are bait. He knows it. They want him to dive on them, to commit. Once he does, another flight, lurking higher in the glare of the sun, will pounce on him. It's a classic tactic, one the Germans themselves perfected. Now it is being used against them with overwhelming numbers. Ignore that flight, Klaus orders over the radio. We're going for the bombers. We must break up the formation. All aircraft attack the lead elements. Use the sun. He leads his pilots in a wide, circling climb, positioning themselves up sun from the bomber stream. From this angle, the escorting P-47s will be partially blinded, looking into the brilliant glare. It is their only advantage. He rolls his FW-190 onto its back and pulls the stick, plunging downward in a screaming dive. The world becomes a blur of blue sky and the growing shapes of the fortresses. His heart hammers against his ribs. This is the moment of maximum danger. He is committed. His eyes flick back and forth, scanning for the escort fighters he knows are coming. And there they are. A pair of Thunderbolts detaches from the main escort and rolls into a dive to intercept his flight. They are fast, impossibly fast. One of them targets him. The other targets his new wingman, a boy named Eric, barely 20 years old, on his 5th combat mission. "Brake, Eric, brake right," Klaus yells. But Eric is fixated on the bombers. Target fascination, a fatal mistake. Klaus is forced to pull out of his own attack run, yanking his fighter into a gut-wrenching turn to try and help his wingman. He is too far away. He can only watch. The P-47 does not try to get on Eric's tail. It doesn't need to. The American pilot, seeing the Focke-Wulf filling his windscreen, simply levels his wings and points his nose directly at his target. It is the one thing they were all warned against, a head-on pass. For a terrifying second, the two fighters rocket toward each other on a collision course. Klaus sees it all in surreal slow motion. He sees the blunt, round nose of the Thunderbolt, and he sees the leading edge of its wings. A row of dark holes, 4 on each side. The muzzles of the 8 Browning M2.50 caliber machine guns. Then they erupt. It is not the rhythmic thud of cannon fire he is used to. It is something else entirely, a torrent, a physical storm of metal. Converging streams of bright orange tracer rounds reach out from the P-47's wings, forming a brilliant cone of incandescent death. It is not aimed at a specific part of Eric's plane. It is aimed at the entire aircraft. The sound that reaches Klaus, a fraction of a second later, is not the pop-pop-pop of gunfire. It is a deafening, high-frequency roar, like a giant buzzsaw tearing through sheet metal. The effect is instantaneous and horrific. Eric's FW-190 does not explode. It does not catch fire and spin gracefully toward the earth. It is systematically, brutally dismantled in midair. The canopy disintegrates into 1,000 fragments. The engine cowling is peeled back like a tin can. The propeller shatters, its blades cartwheeling off into the sky. One wing simply shears off at the root, severed as if by a giant axe. Klaus catches a nightmarish glimpse of Eric's body being thrown about inside the disintegrating cockpit before the entire forward section of the fuselage comes apart in a cloud of shattered components, wires, and vaporized fluid. What's left of the FW-Wulf, a twisted, burning wreck with one wing, tumbles end over end into the abyss. It took less than 2 seconds. 2 seconds of concentrated fire from those 8 guns, and a state-of-the-art fighting machine, along with the young man inside it, ceased to exist. A wave of pure, primal fear washes over Klaus. He wrenches his stick to the side, breaking away so violently that his vision grays out at the edges. The sound of Eric's final, choked scream is lost in a burst of static. The laughing is over. The joke is over. This is not aerial combat. This is industrial slaughter. The P-47 Thunderbolt is not a fighter plane. It is a flying shredder, and they are the ones being fed into its teeth. The airfield at Rhein is shrouded in a grim, freezing mist. The sun is a weak, hazy disk in the winter sky. The surviving Focke-Wulfs of Jagdgeschwader 26 taxi back to their hardstands, their engines sputtering and coughing in the cold air. There are fewer of them than there were this morning, many fewer. Klaus Richter shuts down his engine, and the sudden silence is deafening, broken only by the ticking of cooling metal and the distant whine of an ambulance. He sits in his cockpit for a long moment, the image of Eric's aircraft being unmade branded onto the inside of his eyelids. He feels a profound weariness that has nothing to do with physical exhaustion. It is a fatigue of the soul. He climbs out of the cockpit, his movements stiff. The ground crew chief approaches, his face a mask of concern. Oberleutnant, your port wing. Klaus looks. The metal is pockmarked with a dozen holes, ragged and ugly. Not the neat circular punctures of a 20mm cannon shell, but the brutal, tearing gashes of 50 caliber rounds. He hadn't even realized he'd been hit. He must have flown through the edge of that devastating cone of fire. He touches the rim of one of the holes. The metal is bent inward, a testament to the kinetic force of the heavy slugs. A foot to the right, and they would have torn through his cockpit. The debriefing is a somber affair. The room is thick with cigarette smoke and the smell of stale coffee. The squadron commander, Major Josef Priller, stands before a large map of Germany, his face grim. The losses are catastrophic. 12 pilots lost. 7 confirmed kills against the bombers, but at what cost? Pilot after pilot recounts the same story. Not of being outmaneuvered or outwitted, but of being simply overwhelmed by sheer brute force. They don't even try to dogfight anymore, one pilot says, his voice shaking with a mixture of anger and fear. They come down from 25,000 feet, make one pass, and their guns, God in Himmel, their guns just saw us in half. Another pilot slams his fist on the table. We put cannon shells into them, and they fly on. I watched a jug take a full burst from my 109, its engine was on fire, and it still flew for another 5 minutes and shot down a straggler before it went down. They are not aircraft, they are flying anvils. The mechanics' reports confirm it. They talk about the unbelievable punishment the P-47s can absorb. The Pratt & Whitney radial engine, air-cooled and massive, can take multiple hits and keep running. The sturdy airframe is built like a bridge. There are no vulnerable liquid cooling systems to puncture, no delicate inline engine to seize up. It is a machine built for one purpose: to survive. After the debriefing, the pilots gather in the mess, but there is no jovial camaraderie, no boasting. The laughter is gone, replaced by a heavy, oppressive silence. They drink schnapps, their eyes distant. They are veterans, men who have faced death 100 times, but this is different. This is a new kind of war. The old rules of chivalry and skill seem quaint, foolish. How can your skill matter when the enemy can fly through your best shots and then erase you from the sky in a single 2-second burst from 8 heavy machine guns? Klaus sits alone, staring at an untouched glass. He thinks of Eric. He thinks of the confidence they all had just a few short months ago. The P-47, the jug, the flying milk bottle, they had laughed. It was the laughter of arrogance, of ignorance. Now, the very name invokes a quiet dread. The pilots have new, grim nicknames for it. The 8.50 Tod, the 8.50 Death, the Eisenschwein, the Iron Pig. A new reality has settled over the squadron, a doctrine of dread. You do not engage the Thunderbolt on its terms. You do not trade blows with it. You approach it with the caution of a man handling unexploded ordnance. You use the Focke-Wulf strengths, its roll weight, its acceleration, to make fleeting, slashing attacks. You fire and run. Survival has replaced victory as the primary objective. The goal is no longer to shoot down the enemy, but to avoid being shot down yourself. The psychological toll is immense. Every mission is a flight into the jaws of a machine designed to grind them into dust. Later that night, an orderly pins a new notice to the bulletin board. Intelligence profiles of the American fighter groups, the 56th Fighter Group, the 78th, the 4th. Names and faces of American aces, men like Zemke and Gabreski. These are the men flying the Iron Pigs. Klaus looks at their smiling, confident photos and feels a cold knot of hatred and, to his shame, a sliver of fear. The siren wails across the airfield, a piercing shriek that cuts through the night. A night mission. Formations have been detected crossing the coast. Klaus stands, his body aching. He puts on his flight gear, the movements automatic. He walks out to his patched-up Focke-Wulf, seeing the fresh faces of the replacement pilots, boys even younger than Eric, their expressions a mixture of excitement and apprehension. They do not know yet. They haven't seen the flying buzzsaw up close. He looks up at the dark, starless sky. He knows what is waiting for them up there. And he knows, with a certainty that chills him to the bone, that the butcher's bill for the Reich has only just begun. April 8, 1944, 28,000 feet in the skies west of Berlin. The world has become a vertical battlefield. The neat formations and disciplined tactics of 1943 are a distant memory, replaced by a desperate, swirling chaos that stretches for miles across the upper atmosphere. The very air seems to have turned against the Luftwaffe. It is thinner, colder, and it belongs to the Americans. Klaus Richter, now a Hauptmann using a full Staffel, feels less like a commander and more like a man trying to direct a fistfight in a hurricane. His FW-190 is a D9 model, the long-nosed Dora, with a superior high-altitude engine designed specifically to combat this menace. It is a magnificent machine, the apex of German piston engine design. It is also not enough, not nearly enough. Below them, the B-17s press on, a phalanx of metallic determination. But Klaus barely notices them anymore. His entire focus, his entire being, is consumed by the things flying between him and the bombers, the Thunderbolts. There are hundreds of them, a tidal wave of checkerboard noses, striped cowlings, and garish squadron art. They are no longer just escorts, clinging to their charges. They have been unleashed. They roam freely, hunting in packs, their pilots flush with the arrogance of absolute superiority. They have tasted blood, and they want more. "Stay together," Klaus shouts into his radio, his voice strained. "Engage in pairs. Do not let them isolate you." His words are swallowed by the cacophony of combat. The German attack is a frantic, disjointed affair. Fighters dive in from all angles, desperate to land a blow on the bombers before the P-47s can react. But the Americans are too fast, too numerous. They fall upon the attacking Focke-Wulfs and Messerschmitts like wolves on a scattered flock. Klaus sees a Bf-109, flown by a pilot from another group, make a valiant head-on pass against a B-17. As the German fighter pulls up, a P-47 that seemed to materialize from nowhere drops onto its tail. The German pilot brakes hard, but the Thunderbolt stays with him, its 8 guns spitting fury. The Messerschmitt's tail simply vanishes in a cloud of shrapnel. The aircraft, now mortally wounded, pitches forward into an uncontrollable dive, a streamer of black smoke marking its final journey to the earth. Everywhere he looks, the story is the same. The raw, concentrated power of the jug is winning the day. It doesn't need to be elegant. It doesn't need to be nimble. It just needs to get its guns on a target for a single second. Klaus watches as a P-47 from the 56th Fighter Group, Zemke's Wolfpack, absorbs a flurry of 20mm cannon shells from a Focke-Wulf. Its canopy is shattered, its rudder is shredded, and a long gash is torn in its fuselage. Yet it continues to fly, its big radial engine still pulling it through the sky. The wounded beast rolls over and dives onto another FW-190, its guns blazing, a final, defiant act of destruction before his pilot is forced to bail out. They are unkillable. A voice screams in his headset, "Hauptmann, on your 6, brake!" Klaus's blood runs cold. He slams the stick to the left and kicks the rudder, throwing his Dora into a violent rolling scissor. He catches a glimpse of the pursuer, a P-47, its silver fuselage gleaming, its nose painted a menacing crimson. It's on him, right in his blind spot. He should be dead. He shoves the throttle past the emergency gate, the Jumo engine howling in protest. He dives, the one escape route that might give him a chance. The airframe shudders, the controls stiffen as he plunges towards supersonic speeds. He glances back. The Thunderbolt is still there, its bulky frame somehow keeping pace, a bulldog latched on to his tail. He can see the American pilot in the cockpit, a tiny, goggled figure, impassive and focused. He is not just a pilot in a machine. He is the embodiment of a force Klaus can no longer fight. The force of endless production lines, of limitless resources, of a brutal, pragmatic approach to war that has rendered his own skill and courage almost meaningless. He sees the orange lights flash along the P-47's wings. The end is coming. The sound is not a bang, but a cataclysmic roar, as if the sky itself is being torn apart. 1,000 steel hammers strike his aircraft simultaneously. The instrument panel explodes in a shower of glass and sparks. The armored glass behind his head shatters. A searing pain rips through his right shoulder and leg as shrapnel tears through the cockpit. His world dissolves into a whirlwind of noise, vibration, and agony. Through the spinning chaos, as his stricken fighter begins to come apart around him, he has one last clear image. It is not the sky, not the earth, not the face of his enemy. It is the front of the P-47, now pulling up and away from its kill. He sees the huge, round, black mouth of the Pratt & Whitney R2800 double wasp engine. It is like the eye of a monster, vast, empty, and completely indifferent. It has consumed him. It has consumed his wingmen, his squadron, his air force. The laughter, born of arrogance in the clear skies over France months ago, had been a prelude to this. It had been silenced by resilience, then by fear, and now, finally, by the deafening finality of annihilation. The jug, the object of their ridicule, had become their executioner, proving in the most brutal way imaginable that in the industrial furnace of total war, it is not grace or elegance that commands the sky.